This podcast is part of the Pull Up a Chair podcast network. Let's build community through connection, conversation, and collaboration. This podcast is sponsored by Lever Consulting, editing with a purpose. Check them out at leverconsulting.com for a free consultation.
What does it mean to be happy? 'Cause it looks like we all don't know. Glass half full or empty. Man, we just putting on a show.
Welcome to How's That Working For You Season 2. It's your girls Kat and V, but this time we're taking deeper dives into mental health and breaking stigmas. So get ready because things are about to get real and personal. How's That Working For You is a passion project created with the intention of creating space and awareness around mental health topics that are often hard to talk about. We are not professionals in the field of mental health, but we speak from our own personal experience and thoroughly conduct our own research to help educate others on why it's important to join this conversation. Hey V, what's up?
Hey Kat, I think it's about time that we give the pinnacle of advice, which is how to actually reach out for help for whatever mental conditions our listeners are struggling with, dealing with, / living with.
Yes, those are important things to know.
All right. So I think we should break it down into 3 simple steps. Step number 1, of course, is recognizing that you have a problem. And I think, just to start off the episode, I want to make it very clear that no matter what problem anyone is dealing with, it is no less valid, whether it's just, I am slightly anxious all the time, and I think I might, need somebody to vent to, or if it's fully blown suicidal ideation. All problems are valid and should be addressed because everybody deserves to live a happy, healthy, fulfilling life. We will have all resources that we will talk about today will be linked at the description of this podcast, as well as our website, and, of course, mentioned on our Instagram page. And if anybody listening here is really in dire need of help, please check out these resources because that's the reason we're making this whole episode. Okay, so I guess I'll jump into it now. So step number 1, of course, like you're saying, is figuring out that something's wrong. You don't necessarily need to know exactly what your problem is because we all have lots of problems and it's hard to identify that this is causing this and this or that because that will come up later. It's just important to know that something is holding you back, something is making your life more difficult, or just something for whatever reason doesn't feel right. So once you have those things worked out, take a breath, congratulate yourself on taking the first step into becoming a happier person because the end goal of this is for you to live a happier, more fulfilling life. It's not to beat yourself up over it. It's not to make yourself feel bad because you need help, because everybody needs help every now and then. And that's okay. Perfectly fine. Step number 2 is identifying a person to help you. For most people, this will be a close family member, a friend member. If you don't necessarily have anybody in your life that will fit the mold, and we'll talk about what signs to look for to see if they're a good person, then you can always jump right on to step 3, which is getting bigger help, which could be talking to a counselor or a therapist. And we'll talk a bit more about how to get in touch with these people. So, wrapping back around to if looking at your family members or friends, who is that first person you're going to go and talk to? Don't just be like, oh, they're a good person, they're going to be good enough, because you're dealing with enough right now. You're needing to reach out for help. You don't need to put yourself in a worse situation. If you have a family member that teases you for mental health reasons, or who isn't cool with psychology, self-help, or any of that, you can love them. Not saying that they're a bad person, but maybe look for somebody else. The ideal traits to look for in a person to reach out for help is somebody who's understanding, loving, attentive, or hyper practical.
Right.
I feel like any of those will really be helpful. And of course, if the person cares about you specifically, that's always helpful. And not everybody has people like that in their lives.
Yeah.
Which sucks. And if you don't have anybody in your life that's not a reflection on you,
yeah,
I'm just saying get better friends. And that's not an insult. That's just like, there are people out there like that you can find. The world is a big place. There's billions of people. Having somebody in your life who is supportive will always be helpful.
Absolutely. I totally agree. And I know that sometimes it may feel like you don't have anyone to talk to, but you'd be surprised. I think that especially when you're depressed, you tend to think like nobody wants to be there, or you're a burden or whatever, and that you don't think that you're worth anyone's time. Like, I know that that's a feeling that people can feel. Even if you feel like that, still reach out to these like people who love you, who care about you, because no matter what, like, just it gets better. It really does get better. And what really breaks my heart is when you see families lose someone that they really care about, because like, and then they read the note they left behind, and it's just like they feel like they weren't there for you, or they weren't, like, it's something that could have been prevented if only either of the two parties like had reached out to each other. And it's just so heartbreaking. So it's like, that's a decision. Like, seriously, nothing is worth losing your life for, ever. Like, it really isn't, because that's something that's so precious. And no matter who you are or how disliked you feel, people are going to miss you. They're going to miss you. They love you and they care about you, even if they don't communicate that to you. And if those people aren't maybe those people aren't the right people to communicate to, find somebody else, like V was saying.
Yeah, once you start that conversation with them, it doesn't necessarily have to be a big dramatic thing. You don't have to be like, you need to give me pills. It could be, hey, I've been struggling lately. Hey, I've been hurting lately. I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling anxious. I'm feeling whatever it is that you're feeling. And they may give you advice. They may just be there to listen. But after you have that initial first reach out, then reevaluate how you're feeling. Because you may need to take it a little bit further than just having somebody there.
Yeah.
Depending, like, gauge their reaction. If they, like, think it's more serious and you think it's more serious, then definitely find somebody professional in the field. Not all issues need somebody professional.
Mm-hmm.
Not all issues need a pill. Not all issues need a lobotomy.
I mean, lobotomies are so last century.
So rare.
Like, they're not even an option right now, so don't even worry about lobotomies.
Don't be scared of what you find on the internet when you start looking for solutions.
I mean, also don't assume that you know what you need either.
Because you shouldn't just say, oh, I'm having a problem, and then think it's fixed. Because recovery takes work.
Well, because it's like, especially people, like, I think that most people who suffer from depression end up Googling depression.
Well, that's for 80 things. I know that you went down a rabbit hole with bipolar disorder.
Yeah, I know a lot about it. Like we said, we keep saying, it's like everybody's case is different. And just because drinking omega-3 tablets worked for somebody else, it might not, like, by all means, as long as it's safe.
Don't stick anything up the hoo-ha. That's not going to help.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if masturbation helps. I'm just kidding.
Okay. Guys, listen to our crystals episode. You'll understand what we're talking about. Anyways, going on to being more helpful human beings.
Yeah, that's on Cat and V, by the way, not this show. The crystal show. But anyway, back to what we were talking about. It's just like, don't like think that you can be a Google doctor and like diagnose yourself or anything like that. Definitely trust a professional, and start with the little things first. Maybe you just need to go for a walk, take a deep breath. Like, maybe that'll help. But if that doesn't help, like,
try something else.
Exactly.
It's definitely a process, and don't ever feel like you're stuck or you're out of options, because there's always more options. If your counselor isn't working, find a different counselor.
Yeah, get a new one.
And then, an easy way to do these, because I know, like, saying find a therapist is, like, not super helpful. So there's options out there like BetterHelp, like Therapy Plus, and a couple others. But let's be very clear that these companies can also be problematic because people and money are involved. Mm-hmm. So make sure that before you, like, sign any terms of agreements or any contracts or, like, take a therapist off of there, that you double check, you read everything so you know, like, is this actually confidential? Is this person actually licensed? So, like, Google is your best friend and your worst enemy, so make sure you use it responsibly.
Well, I mean, like, read the fine print.
Yeah, like, there's tools out there, and some of them aren't as kind as they should be or as helpful as they should be, but that doesn't mean that you have to throw the whole system out.
Yeah, and if that's what you can afford, because I think that maybe BetterHelp can be cheaper than most insurance options. Like,
oh yeah,
if that's what you can afford and you're okay with, like I said, read the fine print. Just make sure that if that's what you can afford and, like, you're okay with whatever agreements they have as a company, go for it. I think that you should definitely use the resources that make the most sense to you.
Yeah. And then if you don't know even how to start there, type in whatever insurance type that you have, Medi-Cal, Medicaid, through your work, through your parents. Type in, that thing, therapy, counseling, counseling, therapy, and see what the options are. Because it'll tell you, you can find it online by just a little bit of Googling.
Yeah.
And then if you're in a situation where you don't have any services in your area, type in your actual physical location and, whatever help you think you might need. Because a lot of places do have free options for low-income families. So that's, like, always a good thing. Make sure that you're seeing what resources are in your area, because you never know what's actually out there, and it will just help you keep this process going. And if you're having a hard time communicating what it is that's going on with you, Kat hosted a really good episode a couple weeks ago about communication, healthy communication in relationships. And that goes for any relationship, like, not just dating, but, like, talking to your doctor, talking to your friend, talking to your parent. There's really useful tools in there that you can use in this process.
Yeah, I mean, like, that episode definitely from my voice was geared towards an unhealthy romantic relationship. But that, it's called Dear Man. And if you don't have time to listen to that podcast, just Google DEAR Man, MAN, and it should come up. And it's just, like, a really helpful tool in order to really think through what you're feeling and then communicate that with whoever you want to communicate it with. Especially if you're, like, nervous about it, or this person might be a little difficult, or you recently had a fight and you just needed to step back and cool down. That's definitely check that episode out. But if you can't, it's called Dear Man.
We'll have, that linked. Everything's always going to be linked. It's really important to remember that no matter what you're dealing with, even if it's not a huge mental disorder, that there's still, like, options out there. You don't just have to find a measly coping mechanism that'll keep you alive. Being just alive and breathing isn't the goal in life.
Yeah.
And if you're feeling miserable for whatever reason, I always believe it's worth it to dig deeper.
I mean, there's a difference between being alive and living,
Absolutely. And I know that's something I personally struggled with a lot. Mm-hmm. If you're listening to this on a platform that has comments and you want to share your story with anybody else, we highly encourage you to, because knowing that you're not alone is huge in accepting that it's fine. Like, you're a fine person and you deserve all the love and respect that there is.
Yeah.
So for me, I was a stubborn little mule, and I was like, everything is fine all the time. And I felt so alone. And the difference between suicidal ideation and suicidal actions is ideation is a fleeting thought that you really don't have much control over. Well, I was planning my suicide, and I was planning it, but I was also like convinced that I was fine, which like the cognitive dissonance there is just enormous. Like, obviously that's not fine. And I felt like nobody in the world loved me or cared about me or wanted me to do well or cared if I did bad. But at the same time, I was pathetic. And it was just like a lot of really heavy emotions. And so once I started meeting other people who were like, oh yeah, I was depressed once, and now I'm like a happier person, I was thinking, oh, so these thoughts, you know, people have them, but it's not normal to constantly have these thoughts, was like my wake up call. And so once I had that, it was a slow train of me getting out of my own stubborn head.
I mean, it's like I said, that's exactly what I was talking about when I said that it sometimes feels like you're alone, and it sometimes feels like nobody likes you, or nobody, like, people would be better off without you. Like, that's such a typical, like, negative thought pattern in people with depression. I've had it. I know you just explained that you had it, V. Like, it's just, and it's so common too, which is so sad. And yes, there's suicidal ideation and suicidal, like, tendencies. Yeah, tendencies. And the fine line between those can be passed so easily if you don't get help, you know? And once you reach that, it's like, there's no going back. And trust me 100%, people are going to miss you and grieve, and it's going to be so tragic. So it's just like, if you ever think of like taking your own life, just know that that's not it. That's not the right choice ever, you know? So
there's always other options.
There's always other options, and that's what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so once I got past that one big hurdle, I still had like my anxieties, my PTSD, and I was all like, well, I'm not going to kill myself, so I'm fine. Which is also not great. And it took me, I would say, a good 5 or 6 years before I got to the point I was prior to trying to buy a house, and that whole mess and all the weird anxiety I've been dealing with these last couple of days. It's definitely a process, and it's a cycle going between recognizing that you need help, finding that help, practicing it, and getting to an emotionally stable point. And it just goes on forever, because there will always be problems in the world, but that doesn't mean that you just need to always be miserable. So that's my story. Kat has far more complicated story than me, but she has,
I mean,
a bigger life.
Gosh, I think that we have very different disorders.
Oh, yeah.
And that plays a huge role in how that develops, in terms of like getting help and realizing what you have and whatnot. So it was just, I think that I was always kind of lost in the beginning, because I had no idea that I had bipolar disorder. And once I found out I had bipolar disorder, I was in denial of it. And it started in high school with like people thought that, like, the doctors thought I had depression. And then I got taken out of school, and like, it's a long story, but then I ended up at a different high school, and I was put on antidepressants, and then that made me manic. Hypomanic, to be specific, because I have bipolar too. And then I thought I was cured. Like, I legitimately thought I was cured. And it's like, in hindsight, hypomania is a very terrifying sensation, because you feel so good and so invincible, and you make because you feel so invincible, you make the most reckless decisions thinking that it's okay. So I thought I was cured, so I stopped taking the antidepressants. And over time, that spiraled me back down to depression. And it was so much worse because I had to deal with the PTSD of all the things, like the terrible decisions I made, the embarrassing things I did, just the things that like really destroyed a lot of relationships in my life. And just, you know, I had to drop out of school for a while because of it. Yeah, it was just like, I set this up because it's really just to show you how you can really believe that you're cured. Like, it's just because you take medication for a while and you start feeling better, that means the medications are working, and that means you should take them more. Like, keep taking them, you know.
Keep doing what your doctor told you to do. They know their chemistry better than you do.
Exactly. And it depends, because it's like a team effort, you know?
Yeah.
But, like, it's just, you gotta stick with your regimen, because even if you think that you're cured, there's really no cure for mental illness. Like, at least, like, the mental illnesses that we talk about. Like, there's no cure for major depressive disorder. There's no cure for bipolar disorder. There's no cure for some of these things. They're just like constant management. Like, you have to maintain. And that's something that's so important. And that's something that I wish that younger me would have just grasped earlier on. But I didn't have anyone to guide me, because if other people in my family had bipolar disorder, they didn't know either. So they never taught me. And it's just, I'm just speaking from somebody who's been through it. It's like, if you just need to keep on taking those meds. Just if you start feeling better, that means the meds are working, and that you need to keep on doing it because it's working.
You found the thing that works for you. Don't quit.
The medications were what helped me get through it. And I know that the temptation, or not the temptation, but the pressure and the stigma behind mental health medications is that, like, you may have to take them for the rest of your life. That's true. But there's nothing wrong with that. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. And that you should take it as if you had diabetes and you needed to take insulin and that was keeping you alive, then take the insulin. It's the same thing, because livelihood is at stake when your mental health is at stake.
Absolutely.
And on top of that, I think that relationships matter too. I know that sometimes, like, it depends on where you are at in your mental health journey, or where you're at mentally, but it's part of the reaching out thing, right? Is that you should reach out to people if you feel alone. But also, if you have a good support system, make sure that they know when you're feeling off. Or if you, for example, for me with bipolar disorder, it's characterized with like mood swings. And there are things that people around me can like pay attention to and really keep tabs on. And make sure you educate the people around you that you're close to and that you trust about these little things that, like, for bipolar specifically, like, they can look out for little things like, overspending money. Like, that's one of the symptoms that I deal with, or like erratic behavior, impulsivity, all those things I tell the people in my life to really pay attention to in case I do start spiraling in either direction, especially mania. Mania, in my opinion, is like, it's more pleasant of an experience mentally in the time being, but like, it's more dangerous.
I can see that. Yeah.
In my opinion. It's more dangerous. Like, depression is like, it's bleak, it's terrible being in it, but at least I'm more in my head.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a little more sober, I like to call it, in the sense that I know what I'm thinking. But when I'm hypomanic, it's like balls to the wall, no idea what I'm doing. So thankfully, I've been taking all my medications, and except for the past, I've been taking all my medications, but like, in terms of like working out and sleeping regularly, those are things that I really had to start to pay attention to. that's kind of been thrown out the window because of, like I talked to in the last episode, because of Capstone. And it was scary. It's a scary thing because for somebody like me to not get enough sleep, it's like that could send me into an episode real quick. So, and that's something, it's like, I'm glad that I was around V because she's here and she can see that too. And I'm glad that I was able to stick around with V during her whole move thing, because then I can pay attention to her because, oh my gosh, her symptoms are like very, very physical.
Oh, yeah. I'm like, hey, Kat, can you read this sentence to me? I am too nervous to figure out what an A, what an E, or what an O looks like.
I mean, like, the funniest moment to me was like, because her husband lost his voice, so he couldn't even communicate verbally to her. So he was like writing stuff down on a whiteboard, and she was like, "I'm sorry, babe, I can't read this." And I was like, "It's okay, I got you." So it took like 3 people to get V to understand what the heck we were like, what he was trying to say to her. But thankfully, it was something good. It was good news. So
yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of my input on that. There's probably more, but what do you have anything to add?
I think the last thing I really want to leave off on is it's okay if you don't know what you need. And it's okay if you don't even know what's wrong. But just start this journey, no matter how big or how small your issue is, because people love you and people want you to be happy. Or at least we do. If nobody else in the world that you physically know of cares about you, we care about you.
We do. We don't know. We might not know who you are, but we care. Like, we really do. I'm serious. Because every time I hear about another life that was lost because of suicidal tendencies, my heart breaks a little bit because I know what it's like to be there, you know? And it's so tragic because it could have been prevented. Like,
yes,
no matter
absolutely.
how bad it seems to you in the moment, it's not as bad as it seems. It's really not. It's your brain playing tricks on you. Like, and
you can out-trick your brain.
You can.
And we have help for you.
Yeah.
We'll see you next week. Make sure you check us out on Instagram. This is How's That Working For You. We have a second podcast where we're a lot more fun, the Cat and V Show. We'll see you next time.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay, let's talk about Lever Consulting. They help you create so many things. A perfect personal statement, application essays, presentations. They help create writings that truly represent you. They've got writers, editors, and even researchers. Lever Consulting can make all your stuff easy to read, understandable, and enjoyable. They truly take editing to the next level. Not only do they have flexible rates, they also offer assistance with college applications and job seeking. Check them out at leverconsulting.com and get a free consultation.